And welcome back. Kicking off now chapter 2 in week 1. So, one of the first things we come across is, you know what, if there are a lot of projects going on, sometimes that can create difficulties for us. If I need a resource, will that resource be preoccupied because they're a limited asset? In the Air Force, we used to call this high demand, low density asset. And that can lead, maybe a project that I need to finish up or achieve a certain goal is delayed, and that further delays my projects. And of course, there can be bottlenecks with resource availability, not just people, but leased, rented, borrowed equipment, etc. along the way. This is just a starter list, really. And it's important stuff because remember the triple constraint: scope, schedule, cost. Most projects do not succeed, right? About a third of them canceled midstream. A lot of them come in way over budget. You want a good example of that? Look up the Big Dig in Boston, or check out the Opera House in Australia. Massively over budget, for example. Okay, so we face a lot of challenges. The PMBOK guide is not just a cookbook. We can open up, start on page 1, follow it through to page 800, and have a successful project. Because remember, it's just a framework guiding our approach. And we're facing all of these challenges and hurdles, which are fun. I'm not saying this isn't enjoyable, but expect challenges and be prepared to overcome them, right? As you look to achieve your project goals, okay? And of course, you want to mature your project management approach over time, right? Most organizations are in a maturity process. That doesn't mean they're fully mature. So make recommendations so that you and your company and fellow project managers can master the skills required to competently complete projects and support each other, right? So some companies might be in an initial level of maturity. Some have some repeatable processes, but not much beyond that. Some have a well-defined project management approach. Some are managed, which means they have repeatable processes that are defined and then managed for the changes and challenges along the way. And of course, optimization would be the maximum goal where it just flows. But most companies rarely get there. And you got to ask yourself, from a maturity perspective, how much money would go into optimizing? Maybe managed is good enough. Those are questions you'll have to wrestle with in your organizations. So when we get this project, we have this selection criteria. There's a choice that has to be made. And this is usually being done at the C-suite level, up above us. The CEO, the CIO, the COO, the CFO, the CISO, etc., right? The PMO, all part of that C-suite. And so they're evaluating their corporate strategy with the projects they need to make that come to reality. And in the end, they're going to hand you a business case as one document. What's the case they're making for doing this project that ties to their strategy, and a benefits management plan that should go with it, right? And this is usually done through several types of companies. Frankly, there are lots of types of companies. These are some examples, but it doesn't matter. You have to make your project work within the organization that you have. Now, that C-suite is going to take they could take multiple approaches. What is their criteria, is what you ask yourself, to achieving a business case that then becomes a project where you go out and develop your charter, right? There are lots of these criteria. And so the very nature of selection model says I'm going to have some inputs and some outputs. They're never going to be fully accurate, but are they accurate enough? Do they meet stakeholder risk tolerance, the C-suite risk tolerance, right? Because You can't make money without taking some risk. You can't accomplish something without taking some risk. The question is, how much risk do you take? So you're never going to have the best of all possible information. You have to make a decision based on what you have. And so a lot of times they do it through numeric and non-numeric methods along the way, right? So a non-numeric method is like a subject matter expert, right? We have all known that person who we could turn to and say, hey, if we want to go do an inspection here at this new location, it'll take this, this is what we want to inspect, and et cetera. That person could tell you the budget, how many people, what specialties you'd need, that sort of thing. And all within 10%. Pretty good estimate. That's a subject matter expert. That's what leadership gets paid to do, for example, right? So it's not a bad approach. Another would be analogous estimating. You've probably had that in other courses, or parametric estimating. Those are, analogous. It's I'm by analogy comparing this model, what I want to do, to something I did last year. It's not great, but it's by analogy. It's analogous. Those are kind of non-numeric models. And a few others that the book references. The sacred cow is one. The operating necessity and competitive necessity. You can pause and review the definitions there right from the book. But we've all known somebody that seemed to have a sacred cow, and no matter what you said to them, you just couldn't convince them otherwise, right? It happens. And sometimes it is for other reasons the way to go. Now, I might be extending a product line. I might be doing comparative benefits or focusing on long-term profitability in something that's more sustainable, right? That would be a non-numeric model, a reason to start a project, but it really didn't have much in my... Remember, they were going to give me two documents, a business case and a benefits management plan. My benefits management plan in these non-numeric models is not going to offer me much. I do prefer, of all of these, comparative benefit. As long as I can compare one to another, I can make a better decision based on what's available to me and right in front of me. Now, another method, a way to sort these out, is a Q-sort method. And this is a Q methodology, right? Again, known as a Q-sort method. And this is a systematic study of various viewpoints of these subject matter experts, right? And we use this approach to investigate the various perspectives of the participants who represent various stances on issues, right? And you have the participants rank and sort a series of statements along the way, is how I would do that. More on that in the literature. Now, we said there were numeric models, and then there are also we said there were non-numeric models that we just covered, and then there are numeric models, right, which are going to focus on a numeric value, something more quantitative. And so there are various major types listed on this slide, which we'll go over here in the next few slides. So, for example, profit or profitability, right? Two ways to do profit or profitability. Well, four ways: payback period, NPV, IRR, and profitability index. Payback period is just, we go through each of these in detail here coming up. But NPV and IRR are the more common methods. Net present value is the present value of the cash flows in looking at the rate of return that your company wants for this project, right, based on your initial investment, right? And so it's a way of calculating the return on investment, or ROI, based on what you're spending the project. IRR, internal rate of return, that's looking at it similarly. It's looking at, I could take this $1 million and invest in your project, and that might, I think, that will return 29% interest rate this year, or I could invest it in the bank and return 5% interest, right? Which are you going to go? It's just a simple comparison. You aren't doing these as a project manager, you are guiding the approach. So you need to have knowledge of them and what goes into them. But you would have finance folks that are working with you to address the details. Now, payback period just basically says, how soon do you want your money back? If I loan you $10, I want it back now. But that's not likely because I just loaned it to you. So tomorrow will do. Not next week, not next month is really not preferred. Payback period, shorter is better. And here's an example of payback period. You could numerically do it in a project cost divided by annual cash flow. There are drawbacks and positive parts to all of these. Payback period is a pretty good approach, though. Then we can talk about discounted cash flow. Now, discounted cash flow really gets into an accounting approach, really. And so when we can discount money along the way, it helps us understand, because money decreases in value over time, right? And so we want to make sure we're maximizing our advantages with the money today, right? And so we can use NPV to detail our cash, our discounted cash flow. So in net present value, if you recall, we said net present value is the present value of the cash flow at the required rate of return. That's what this is about, the rate of return, the interest rate of your project compared to your initial investment, which you have here, which is the cash flow in a period of time. And so an A sub 0 is the initial cash flow. That formula is broken down into these various features. Pause and study those, go back and forth until you're comfortable with how they plug and play. Because then we look at an example of how that might work. So the net present value of a project, say the initial cash infusion was $100,000, right? Plus, then we're going to sum NB. NB is the number of periods involved. In this case, there were 8. T is the number of years in life. In this case, 1. And the numerator up here, right here, is the summation of the cash flow, or $25,000. So this was the initial cash infusion, and this is the cash flow that you expect. Now the denominator is going to be 1 plus the interest rate. Okay, so it looks like 15% interest rate, or the discounted rate, right, to the t power. And when you calculate that out, again, you would have finance do it for you, or somebody on your budget team, and you get a net present value of $1,939. Now, what I want to do is compare that net present value of this project versus the net present value of another approach for this project, or the net present value of another project itself. And I'm always going to take the larger of the two net present values. The same can be said for internal rate of return. Internal rate of return, like any of these profit models, have advantages, but basically bigger is better. Would you rather 29% return on investment, or would you rather have 10%? I'm going to take 29%. As a project manager, you need to be aware of what it is and know that bigger is better as you're making your decisions. Now, we also have real options, right? So a real option gives the firm's management the right, but not the obligation, to do certain business opportunities or investments. So the real option refers to projects involving tangible assets and versus some financial instrument along the way. So real options can include a decision to expand or defer or wait or abandon it completely, right? Do we expand on our contracts or limit them or switch them up. Okay, let's take a break and then